Quite frankly, ladies and gentlemen, this health crisis we face is unparalleled in modern times. The gravity of the situation is difficult to get across with just a few numbers, but with 5,000 now infected, twice the number when we met a couple of weeks ago, over 2,500 dead, nearly twice the number of when we met a couple of weeks ago, you start to get a sense of the rapid escalation now we're seeing of the virus as it moves from what was a linear increase in cases to now almost an exponential increase in cases.
As the American military digs into the latest war with terrorists, 3,000 members of the armed forces will next be heading for a battle against an enemy they cannot see, cannot defeat with conventional weapons, and cannot force to bend to a reasonable will. President Obama will go far beyond what was once a promise for a 25-bed portable hospital in Liberia and ramp up the attack with money and that military. Is America doing what they must, or are we being dragged into military action in yet another foreign land that may ensnare us for decades? Welcome back to MidPoint. Board-certified physician, recipient of the Patient's Choice Award in 2008, 2009, a keen eye toward the politics of healthcare, Dr. Elaina George joins us. Dr. George, thank you so much. Good to see you again.
Good to see you too. Thank you.
Dr. George, let me begin first of all with a soundbite from the U.S. Ambassador to Liberia, Deborah Malloch, who said last Friday that the U.S. will work with Liberian security forces to improve the local response to Ebola. Here it is.
We are going to be training the Liberia National Police and the armed forces on how they can best support isolation operations and to provide security near hospitals, holding centers, and treatment units. This is upcoming. This will also provide further training to the police on community outreach, as well as additional personal protective equipment.
Dr. George, are a lot of Americans right now wondering why we have to send the military? And when we look at the area of the country that we're going into, and certainly the sociological reasons that we're there, the type of area that it is, the people, the governments that are there, are we sending the military in because, frankly, they've got to be there in order to make sure this thing works in what is a very politically charged and fractured area of the world?
It's a very complex answer to that question. It's important that they have quarantine measures in effect, and that's one of the things that's caused this outbreak to expand the way it has. There really hasn't been a very coordinated effort towards keeping people from traveling outside of affected areas. And this disease, or this virus, is relentless in infecting people who come in contact. So I understand how the military may be used to try to have more boots on the ground, if you want to put it that way, to try to help corral people from leaving these areas. But they also need to spend a lot more effort on treating these folks and actually giving them the sanitation, the things that they need so it stops spreading.
Is again then dealing with sanitation and so many of these things, when we look at the military going in, can we just say that, and this may be difficult for some people to hear, and maybe they'll think I'm going overboard, but simply put, the American military is better prepared, they're better trained, and they have a better sense of organization to know what needs to be done. And frankly, some of the countries we're going into are so fractured that they don't have a real direction or a leadership clue in how to basically grab the hold of this thing and start to do something about it.
I think that's a very good way to put it. I think that it needs to be coordinated, and it needs to have enough people involved, enough military, enough people to actually add some sort of safety factor to this. But again, they need to have enough protective gear. There's only 250 doctors in Liberia right now left to treat these patients. So we actually have to have a medical side to the military side of this commitment.
Why then is, and again, here's one of those questions I think that in light of the fact that America is a leadership country on the planet right now, we're the ones everybody looks to, Americans are asking themselves, where's everybody else? Where's the rest of the world in doing this? Certainly America has money and doctors, but there are people who really want to see the rest of the world step up. And fair to say from your experience and looking at this, that the rest of the world has dragged their feet horribly getting to this point.
I'd agree with that. The IMF did have about a $300 million commitment that they mentioned or referenced about a month ago. I have no idea what happened with that money. And we certainly are hearing from these countries that they don't have enough medical equipment to handle this outbreak. And as this thing goes along, it's a lot of moving parts. The virus seems to be changing. It's causing a lot more people to be affected than ever has been in the history of this virus. And I think we're just playing catch up, and we need to be a lot more aggressive about everything. And that means quarantining folks. Anybody traveling on an airliner, I think it's prudent to actually quarantine them for at least 21 days before they're allowed to fly, especially from these affected countries.
When we talk about the affected countries, and what you just talked about with regard to quarantine, does it make sense, and I know we're talking about maybe science fiction here in many ways, but are we getting to the point where an entire nation will need to be quarantined? And I specifically look at Liberia because this is where so much of it is coming from. And if you're going to get a hold of something, you've got to clamp down and stop people from moving around the globe. That's a tough thing to say, but it sure makes some sort of sense.
It is a tough thing to say, but we need to talk about reality. The soundbite before I came on talked about linear to exponential growth. And exponential means that it's a wildfire. Even the CDC is now coming out and saying that, we're not really ahead of this, and we should expect it to come to the United States, and it's possible it can go everywhere that people travel. And we need to now start, I think, personally taking responsibility for our health. I think people need to be prepared, have water, have food in your home, just in case things start to get a little bit more dicey, so that you can actually protect yourself and not expect or depend on an outside source to help you.
Okay, I'm going to touch on that here in just a moment, but I want to get back again into the country issue here, which we really need to look at.
Sure.
Is it in your opinion then, and in the opinion perhaps of some medical professionals, that a country like Liberia, if you're really going to get serious, send in a military, but you have to quarantine and shut down a country? And I can only imagine the ramifications of what that would be and how difficult that would be. But if you got to stop something, you've got to close the borders.
There is a school of thought, and I've heard virologists say this, that in order to let this or corral this process, you have to literally quarantine the entire country. I have heard that, and it may be possible and it may be necessary to do that so that we can actually stop this. Everybody on the globe is at risk, potentially. And it is important to get ahead of this.
What kind of cost are we talking about here? Literally, not only in money, but in time.
Oh, it's amazing. I don't even have a number to put on it, but we're talking about human lives here, so I don't think there can be a cost that's too much to protect everybody that you possibly can.
But it is disappointing to know that in many ways the rest of the world has not stepped up as America is prepared to step up, correct?
Absolutely. I think that everybody, African countries, Middle Eastern countries, everybody needs to have a hand in this, not just the United States. Hopefully the UN will start to take a more proactive role instead of just quoting numbers at this point.
Well, fair to say, too, that we're dealing with some of the more corrupt governments in the world, certainly in Africa and certainly in that area of the country, that area of the world. So trying to get them to basically look at anything that won't put money in their pocket might be the most difficult thing, correct?
I don't want to get involved with the motivations of countries, but I can say that the governments in these countries need support. They don't have a medical infrastructure that we do. And if the world can mobilize a mobile medical unit to go in and start quarantining, start treating these people, start really educating them about sanitation, that's the best way to stop this.
I've only got about a minute left. You mentioned getting food and water in the home. I hold in my hand right now a flyer from the CDC that has 4 squares on it, and I'm just going to show it right here because we just picked this out, but it says facts about Ebola. And at the bottom of this, it says Ebola poses no significant risk to the United States. Are they kidding us, or are they just trying to tamp down the possible furor about this?
That's really disconcerting, because the head of the CDC did come on and say that we can expect Ebola to enter the United States. So they're talking about two sides of their mouth on this one. I think we need to think about it in terms of common sense. This is a virus that's affecting everybody, that potentially with the travel from country to country could enter our United States. And ultimately, it's about protecting yourself and your family. And that means common sense things, as we talked about before.
So in your professional opinion, then, this is wrong. This shouldn't be out here. This is really a bad idea.
No. I think that's just trying to make people, not to gin up fear. And I think that's, unfortunately, it's keeping people from protecting themselves. And now is the time to actually protect yourself. Eat properly. Go to the farmer's market. Eat organic when you can. Take things like zinc, vitamin D3, vitamin C. Really get some quality rest so that you can actually prime your immune system so that you can survive this.
All right, Dr. Elaina George, that'll be the final word, but we will talk again. I thank you for your frank comments.
Thank you so much.
More comments to come as we question everything right here on MidPoint.